Folks, welcome to the dirtiest job in the history of the universe. I'm not talking about unclogging a grease trap or wrestling a 1,000-pound pig. No, this is the job that started everything, turning a ball of molten rock into something that could think, feel, and eventually complain about Mondays. Let's roll back the clock, way back. About 4.5 billion years ago, Earth wasn't a planet yet, it was a forge. A screaming, glowing ball of magma still cooling from the cosmic hammer that formed it. The surface? A churning ocean of lava, red-hot and restless, with volcanoes the size of countries blasting plumes of poison gas into a sky that had never seen blue. No oxygen, no ozone. Just a choking soup of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur, steam, air so toxic it dropped you before you could utter fresh breeze. And then came the late heavy bombardment. Picture this. For tens of millions of years, the solar system played demolition derby with Earth as the main target. Asteroids, comets, some the size of small moons, slamming in at tens of thousands of miles an hour. Each one vaporizing rock, triggering firestorms, and sending tsunamis racing across oceans that were already boiling. It was chaos. Absolute, unrelenting chaos. And yet, somehow, in the middle of that hellscape, the ingredients for life started showing up for work. Down in the deep ocean, away from the fireworks on the surface, something quieter was happening. Hydrothermal vents, we call them black smokers today, were already cranking. Towering chimneys of mineral deposits belching superheated water loaded with hydrogen, methane, iron sulfides, all the raw stuff chemistry needs. Extreme heat on one side, cold seawater on the other. Mineral surfaces acting like tiny catalysts. Energy gradients you could practically feel. These weren't pretty coral reefs. They were industrial forges. Hot, pressurized, dark, and loaded with potential. Up top, in the shallow pools and storm-lashed seas, lightning was doing its part too, cracking across the sky, zapping simple gases into amino acids, sugars, the building blocks of proteins and nucleic acids. The famous primordial soup wasn't a gentle broth. It was a violent electric kitchen where molecules got forged in fire and flash. This was no paradise. It was a brutal, high-stakes workshop. No safety gear, no coffee breaks, just chemistry grinding away day after endless day in conditions that would make the toughest jobs on Earth look like a spa day. But here's the thing about dirty jobs. Sometimes if the conditions are just right, something stubborn starts to stick. All right, folks, we've got our workshop set up. The forge is hot, the vents are smoking, the lightning's popping off like a bad welding job. Now comes the hard part, getting something, anything, to stick around longer than the next wave or eruption. Enter the first tiny rebels. These weren't cells. They weren't even alive. Not yet. They were just molecules. Simple chains of atoms doing what molecules do, bumping into each other, reacting, falling apart. But a few of them got stubborn. Picture this, a little network of chemicals where each one helps make the next, and the next helps make the first. It's called an autocatalytic set, fancy term for a chemical chain gang that keeps itself going. Molecule A makes more of B. B helps crank out C. C loops back and pumps out more A, and maybe throws in a little extra for good measure. No boss, no blueprint, just a self-sustaining loop that says, I'm not done yet. These networks weren't perfect. They leaked, they broke, they got diluted by the ocean. But in those mineral-rich pockets around the vents, in those protected little corners, they could concentrate, they could persist, they could keep the cycle spinning. And here's the dirty secret. Once you have something that sustains itself, it starts to compete. The better loops, the ones that run faster, use resources more efficiently, resist falling apart, they start to outnumber the sloppy ones. It's evolution, before evolution had a name, at the molecular level. But the real game changer? That came when one of these stubborn molecules learned a new trick, how to copy itself. Enter RNA, short strands of ribonucleic acid. Not DNA yet, nothing that fancy, just RNA doing double duty. It could store information like a crude blueprint. And here's the kicker, it could act as its own catalyst, a ribozyme, an enzyme made of RNA. So now you've got a molecule that says, here's my pattern, and I can make copies of me. Not perfectly, mind you. Copies came out sloppy sometimes. Mutations, variations, and in a world of limited building blocks, nucleotides floating around in short supply, the versions that copied faster, more accurately, or hung together longer, they started to win. It's Darwinism in a test tube. No eyes, no brains, just chemical favoritism. The good replicators multiplied. The bad ones faded away. Imperfection became the engine of progress. These weren't living things, not by today's standards, but they were the first things that could fight back against entropy. Entropy wants everything to fall apart, spread out, become random mush. These little RNA rebels, they were saying, not on my watch. They persisted, they improved, they passed on their tiny advantages. And once that cycle started, replication with variation and selection, there was no stopping it. The dirty job had a foothold. Something had learned how to keep showing up for work, even in the worst conditions imaginable. Okay, folks, we've got our stubborn little RNA rebels out there, copying themselves, mutating, competing in the chemical soup. But here's the problem. They're naked, exposed, floating free in a vast, violent ocean. One good current, one stray pH swing, one hungry mineral surface, and poof, they're gone. Diluted, broken, back to random mush. Entropy doesn't take vacations. So how do you protect these fragile replicators? How do you give them a fighting chance to keep grinding? You build them a home, a barrier, a little fortress. Enter the protocell. These weren't real cells. Not yet. No nucleus, no fancy machinery, no mitochondria humming away. Just simple fatty molecules, lipids, doing what lipids love to do in water, self-assemble into bubbles. Spherical vesicles, tiny hollow spheres with a double layer of fat. Think soap bubbles, but tougher. Made from amphiphilic molecules, one end loves water, the other hates it. So they naturally snap together into closed compartments. These protocells form spontaneously. No blueprint required, just chemistry being lazy and efficient. Now, here's where the magic happens. Some of those RNA strands, or even the autocatalytic networks, get lucky. They get trapped inside one of these fatty bubbles as it forms. Suddenly, they're not alone in the big bad ocean anymore. They're concentrated, protected, surrounded by a semi-permeable wall that lets small building blocks in but keeps the valuable copies from drifting away. The protocell becomes a tiny factory. Inside, higher concentrations of nucleotides, faster replication, less dilution. Outside, the harsh primordial sea stays out. And the best part, these vesicles weren't static. Feed them more lipids from the surrounding soup, and they grow. Swell, stretch, get them big enough, agitated by waves or heat, or just random jostling, and they split, divide, bud off into daughter vesicles. Each daughter carries a copy, or copies, of the replicating molecules inside. Now you've got inheritance. Not perfect, not elegant, but real. A population of protocells, each with their own little RNA crew, competing for resources. The ones with better replicators inside, they grow faster, divide more often, pass on more copies. The ones with dud chemistry, they fizzle out. This is it, folks. The tipping point. Replication plus variation plus selection, now happening inside protected compartments that can grow and divide. Darwinian evolution has a physical home. No longer just molecules fighting in open water. Now it's proto-organisms, primitive, messy, inefficient, but starting to behave like living things. They eat by absorbing raw materials, grow, reproduce, divide, and pass on their traits, the RNA sequences that worked. It's still a dirty job. Leaky membranes, sloppy division, lots of failures, but the failures get flushed away and the successes keep showing up. From random chains to self-sustaining loops, to self-replicating strands, to protected, dividing protocells. The dirty job just got its first crew. Small, fragile, but stubborn as hell. And once you have populations competing, improving, adapting, there was no going back. The forge had sparked something that refused to die. So now we've got our protocells. Little fatty bubbles with RNA crews inside, growing, dividing, competing like tiny startups in a cutthroat market. But let's be honest, these things were still primitive, leaky, inefficient, barely hanging on. The real dirty job, it was just getting started. For the next few 100 million years, that's right, hundreds of millions, these proto-life forms did what any good crew does. They kept showing up, kept tweaking the process, kept improving on the last shift's mistakes. First, the replication got better. Those RNA strands that copied more faithfully, they dominated. Less errors meant more reliable offspring. Then came the big upgrade: proteins. See, RNA could catalyze reactions, but it wasn't great at everything. Some jobs needed a better tool, so the system started using short peptides, chains of amino acids, to help with catalysis. Ribonucleoproteins, RNA and protein working together. Better efficiency, faster reactions, more energy harvested from the chemical gradients around the vents, and eventually, after a long grinding apprenticeship, the baton passed. DNA took over as the stable storage medium, double-stranded, tougher, less prone to damage. RNA became the messenger, proteins the workhorses. The genetic code emerged, that universal language linking nucleotides to amino acids. It wasn't a sudden invention, it was trial and error over countless generations, favoring the systems that could build better proteins, which in turn could build better replication machinery. A virtuous cycle. Metabolism ramped up too. Primitive pathways to break down simple organics, extract energy, recycle building blocks. No more just floating in the soup hoping for handouts. Now the protocells, now true cells, could actively use their environment. They started forming communities, microbial mats, sticky layers of cells coating rocks, sharing resources, protecting each other. The oldest fossils we have, stromatolites, layered rock structures from ancient bacteria, go back over 3.5 billion years. Proof that these early crews were already building things bigger than themselves. This wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, it was a long, slow grind. Dead ends everywhere, countless lineages that fizzled out. But the winners? They adapted, they specialized, they diversified. Some learned to use sunlight, photosynthesis, first with sulfur, then water, the cyanobacteria that eventually oxygenated the planet. That single innovation changed everything, but it took billions of years to get there. From the first fragile protocell to the first real microbes to mats that reshaped the atmosphere, every step was hard-won. Every improvement paid for in failed experiments. No shortcuts, no cheat codes, just relentless, generational hard work in the toughest workshop imaginable. And after all that grinding, something remarkable happened. These simple cells didn't just survive, they thrived, they spread, they set the stage for everything that came after, including us. All right, folks, take a breath. We've gone from a screaming ball of magma, through black smokers and lightning kitchens, through stubborn RNA rebels, through fatty bubbles that learn to divide, all the way to the first real microbes building mats and changing the world. Hundreds of millions, billions of years of the hardest, dirtiest work imaginable. And it all started right here, on this one little rocky planet. Now here's the question that keeps scientists up at night. Was this a 1 in a trillion miracle? Or is it just what happens when you give chemistry the right ingredients, a source of energy, and enough time? Most of the folks who study this, astrobiologists, chemists, planetary scientists, they're leaning toward the second option. Because the steps we just walked through, they're not magic. They're chemistry, physics, natural laws doing their thing. Water as a solvent, energy gradients to drive reactions, abundant carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, mineral surfaces to catalyze, time, lots and lots of time. If a planet has those pieces, liquid water, or maybe another solvent, the basic elements, some reliable energy source, vents, sunlight, tidal heating, whatever, and it doesn't get sterilized every few million years. Then the dirty job has a real shot at getting started. We already know the building blocks are everywhere. Amino acids in meteorites, organic molecules on comets, sugars and bases detected in space clouds, billions of planets in the habitable zone of their stars. Trillions if you count rogue worlds and subsurface oceans. Red dwarf stars, the most common kind, have rocky planets by the bucket load, some with water, some with atmospheres, some that have been stable for billions of years. Europa, Enceladus, Titan, even Mars might have had its shot in the past. And out there? Exoplanets by the thousands, many in the right spot, some with water vapor detected in their atmospheres. So yeah, the cosmic payoff is this. This isn't a miracle that only happened once. It's probably a repeatable process, a natural outcome, like rust forming on iron or crystals growing in a cave. Not guaranteed on every habitable world. Some get cooked, some freeze, some get bombarded into oblivion, but on enough of them, given enough time, life should show up. Maybe as simple as our early microbes, maybe something weirder, maybe using different chemistry. But the bootstrap, the dirty job of turning non-life into something that copies, competes, and improves, that seems to be written into the laws of the universe. We might not be special, we might just be early. One crew among many that clocked in, did the grind, and eventually looked up at the stars wondering where everyone else is. So next time life feels hard, next time the world seems like a tough, messy workshop, remember, it started in the worst conditions imaginable. Hot, dark, violent, unforgiving, and yet, it kept showing up for work, every single day, for 4 billion years. That's the real dirty job. And we're still on the clock.